Upper Echelon is brought to you by Deloitte for innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning. Turn to Deloitte. Nicolas Kruger is the chief executive of MMI Holdings and an actuary. Nicolas, I was looking through my records, and in the past, actuaries were very popular choices for chief executives of life offices, but it seems to have gone out of favor. Now you have accountants, even marketing people. Do you feel a bit alone?
In some ways, Alec, I feel a bit alone. Look, a job of a CEO is anyway a bit of a lonely job. But, I guess at some point in your actuarial career, you have to make the decision, do I go on with the technical matters or do I go into a leadership role where actually, but it's just a little bit of what you need as CEO. You need much more.
You're from Pretoria, obviously Afrikaans, from an Afrikaans background. In the past, that used to be a straight line into the public service. Did you ever think of it?
I must say, in high school, I sort of considered engineering maybe as a career. And then in matric, it was either actuarial science or chartered accountant. So I knew either of the two would take me into the business world. And then obviously I wanted something with a challenge in mathematics. And, I was pointed towards actuarial science. In fact, I had the privilege to have an interview with Marinus Darling at Sanlam, when I was matric, to ask for his advice. And he strongly recommended actuarial science as a platform for a business career.
So that's extraordinary. How did you crack that?
Yeah, look, we knew some people who knew Marinus Darling at the time, and it was actually fantastic. And it really, I made up my mind to become an actuary after that discussion with him. I sat in his offices here in Sandton for an hour, and after that, I knew that's the only thing I want to become, an actuary, and look, the rest is history.
I'm so glad to hear that. I obviously also knew Marinus Darling through the work that I did and had great admiration for the man. Quite often I talk also to young people who like to come around, but I've got a lot more time than he has, and certainly you. Do you do that too?
Yes, in fact, I get a lot of satisfaction from sort of investments into some of these youngsters. So from time to time, they ask for my advice, and then I arrange discussion with other actuaries and actuarial students so that they get the views from different levels. But my diary is also open for these youngsters. And in fact, as a group, we've just given a bursary to a black student who got 5 distinctions in matric, and he grew up in very poor circumstances, and in fact he couldn't get a bursary, so there was this article in the press. So when we saw that, we arranged discussions with him, and I also saw him in my office, and he was overwhelmed to see the CEO as well, and we gave him a bursary for first year actuarial science. So that's an example of an investment into the future.
And also from a perspective of how to invest your own time. Sometimes chief executives think that they have to spend 99.9% of their time just running the business, but there is another side to life, which I see in your case includes breeding buffaloes, the biggest bubble in South African history.
Well, I wouldn't say that's a bubble, but at least that's a sideline, so I'm not dependent on it. But, in fact, we've got a very interesting farm in the Karoo. We started with sheep and Goonie cattle, and then at some point said, well, maybe we should go into roan and sable and buffalo, these scarce species, and it's a lot more exciting. It's a lot more interesting. It is a bit more risky, you're right. I mean, the prices go up and then they go down again, but somehow it's, as a business, very sustainable, but obviously satisfaction is more the interaction with nature and to have something totally different from the business world.
That's interesting. You say the prices go down. I haven't seen the buffalo prices. I have a very good friend who farms buffaloes as well, and he says he's making as much money as he can while the bubble lasts, but he has no doubt that it isn't going to continue indefinitely. You don't think we've got to saturation point there?
I don't think so. I think the demand from a hunting point of view is still there, so from foreigners, and that sort of underpins the market. But I must say, I agree, some of the prices that have been paid for buffalo bulls, these 15 million and 18 million numbers that have been thrown around, I mean, I agree that sounds like a bubble. But I mean, if you take the price per roan as an example, that's gone from 90,000 rands per round, and it's gone up to 200,000, and it went back to 90,000, and now it's say up again at 150,000. So as an example now, over say a 10-year period. So, it's volatile, but at the end of the day, farming is risky, but it's a lot more about the overall experience than the business case necessarily.
And were those animals indigenous to the area that you are farming them in?
Yes, in fact, we've done quite a bit of homework, and in fact, long ago, those animals used to exist there. So, and in fact, I have to add that if you do this right, it can be a very profitable business too. I don't want to give the perception that it's. I mean, in fact, you've got a bigger proportion of your capital working for you if the animals are more expensive compared to the land. That's the rationale.
It's very interesting, the whole that side of it. South Africa almost returning to the way it used to be 150 years ago. But
Yes.
that's not what you're looking at now, day to day. You still use your maths, I'm sure, to a large degree. We do hear that this is the age of the mathematician. Do you think it gives you an advantage having that background?
I would certainly say being an actuary in the insurance industry helps a lot, to understand the technicalities, but obviously a lot of the things you do day to day, it's more managerial, leadership, to give the vision, to communicate and so forth. Really the interaction with stakeholders, I spend a very big percentage of my day doing that, but it helps a lot to have that background when the technical valuation reports, are discussed at forums, or when our profits are discussed. I mean, it's to me, it's not a black box, but it's to many others a black box. Really, what's going on there? So it's a very good foundation.
Do you read business books?
Yes. I really enjoy business books. Given the time constraints, I focus more on sort of almost for financial press. Reading of various financial articles where I get the summaries. But from time to time, when on holiday and so forth,
Jim Collins.
I've just bought Jim Collins' new book. Obviously, Good to Great was a great book, but
Good to Great describes almost you. You one company man, low profile. The business from the bottom up. Quite often, people lose sight of people like you in leadership positions, and yet usually they're the most successful.
Yes, sometimes people ask me, am I a bit old-fashioned because, the youngsters nowadays, I mean, they want variety quickly, their ambition is almost bigger than their contribution, and, they want to move around, but I guess I'm part of the previous generation where you started in one place and, you almost want to make a contribution. But having said that, I think part of the reason that I've been around in the same group is because it's been a very dynamic group. I started in 91 at Momentum, then in 92 R&B acquired Momentum, introduced a whole new culture. In fact, we started to grow phenomenally from that point onwards.
Is that where you met Larry Dippenaar?
Yes, and I've had the privilege to be exposed to the three founders. But to put it in perspective, the MMI Holdings Group today, it takes us 2.5 days to make the profit that the Momentum made in a whole year when I joined. Just to put the growth over the years in perspective. So because the group's been so dynamic and it's been growing fast and obviously did various transactions over the years, it's not the same group, but the roots are obviously the same.
It's an extraordinary story. Along the way, you made a number of acquisitions. Now, business school textbooks will tell you 80% of acquisitions fail. Have 80% of yours?
Well, Alec, I think we're certainly sure that we're part of the 20% that make it. I think there are various reasons why mergers fail, and obviously there's a lot of articles written about it, but I think the first very big hurdle is how strong is the business case? Is it really, is it driving somebody's ego? Do you want to become bigger, or will it make both organizations stronger? Is the 1 + 1 = 3, is it true? And I must say, if you look at Momentum and Metropolitan, it's almost astounding if you compare it business line by business line, how the two organizations complement each other. The most simple example is obviously on the retail side, where Momentum used to operate at the upper end, Metropolitan at the lower end, and by combining the two retail businesses, now we offer retail products across the whole market. So very complementary and really not competing, but in our case, we're definitely much stronger, and we've got significant more scale benefits now to be a much more formidable competitor. We're now the third biggest on scale in South Africa.
I'm sure you've seen the irony in that. Marinus Darling, who brought you into this industry, was also the man who spun off, he was involved in the spinning off of Metropolitan as a separate entity from Sanlam. And now it's that young man who had a conversation with him is running the enlarged group.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder, on reflection, how he would feel about sort of the Metropolitan as a standalone. But I think in a way that was also forward-looking by focusing Metropolitan on the black market and really growing that business almost well ahead of its time, before it almost became, I guess, politically the right thing to do. So, I mean, really established an excellent business there that flourished on its own for a very long time. And obviously, no more recently, it made sense for Metropolitan to tie up with a Momentum to be part of a bigger group. But what's great is that we will continue using the Momentum brand in various markets, and then the Metropolitan brand. So both legacies of both groups will continue, although both are part of a bigger group, MMI Holdings.
You know all about branding, given the First Rand that you came out of. Was it a bit of a wrench to leave the First Rand group to for instance, particularly in your case, because as a member of the executive committee, you were running the group as a whole, although responsible clearly for your operation, you had a lot to say, no doubt, about other issues.
Yes, that was definitely a big mind shift, to operate on our own. But I think that the timing was right. The various reasons why it made sense for First Rand to focus more on banking, and then to really facilitate the transaction. And this new insurance group had to be listed on its own. It almost became too big, and we as a 30 billion rand market cap organization, as MMI Holdings, we had to almost list on our own. Having said that, there's still a very strong relationship, the strategic relationship between the groups, and at the personal level between the various individuals. And I must say I learned a lot, from the almost the founders of the R&B group, but also the senior executives in First Rand, from a values point of view, a business case point of view. It was just so valuable for what we're doing today.
And Discovery, they were in the same group. They were unbundled earlier than yourselves, but you're still both part of Lowry, GT Ferreira and Paul Harris's operations in R&B Holdings. What's that relationship like?
Yes, I think it's fair to say that there's a common shareholder, between Outsurance, Discovery and MMI Holdings. But it's important to acknowledge that they don't, that shareholder, they don't get involved in the operational matters. So operationally, MMI and Discovery competing head-on with each other.
Do you go for the same markets?
Yeah, in some respects, we go for the same markets. Fortunately, MMI, for example, see Africa as a very big growth opportunity, and Discovery decided not to focus
on... Well, they've gone to China and India,
on Africa, yes.
And the UK?
They're focusing on different markets. So Discovery is just but one of our competitors.
But what about healthcare? That is something that you have looked at, invested in, are building. Are you starting to hit heads there?
Yeah, again, the MMI's healthcare position is quite different. We, for example, the administrator of the GEMS, Government Employees Medical Scheme, and currently have more than 500,000 families there that we administer. And that's really low-cost administration, efficiency and scale and so forth. We do have a Momentum Health Open Scheme, which I guess would compete with the Discovery Open Scheme. But the difference between us and them is that we've got a variety of restricted schemes, whereas the open scheme is just one of our building blocks, whereas in the Discovery case, it's the biggest building block in their stable.
Nicolas, a lot of people like your business. They like you as a CEO. They like the team that you've got around you. But the question mark from an investment's perspective is every single merger does go through teething problems. When do you think you're going to put everything to bed and then be able to start performing and reaching the potential that no doubt you'd like to see in the share price?
Yes, look, that's a very good question. I think it's very important for us to achieve our merger integration objectives. We've set ourselves an expense saving target of 500 million, and we said to the market that will take about 3 years to extract that. So I think we are realistic. We can't complete a merger in 1 year. But that's just a small part of what we try to achieve. It's really to become a bit more efficient, but at the same time, this year we've said to ourselves, this is a year of delivery. Last year we made great plans, we put structures in place, we communicated plans. This year we need to deliver on those. So 2012 is the year of delivery for us, and clearly we need to make sure that we become more externally focused. Keeping one eye on the integration, we've got teams there, but we need to look out for the growth opportunities 3, 5, 10 years from now. And with that hat on that, we've also put 2 people in India now to look at opportunities for us there, and that we focus on the 12 countries in Africa where we've established a presence.
Nicolas Kruger is the Chief Executive of MMI Holdings. And Upper Echelon was brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte.